Good evening. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Upstate Suzuki Academy Viola Talks. I'm Miss Mandy here in South Carolina. I will give it a second. I know I sent out some text reminders a few minutes ago, so I'm going to give everybody a minute or so to get into the channel. I hope everybody's having a great week, and the weather is finally turning fall here. I'm so excited. I miss fall from living up north. So I'm really excited about our talk today because it really connects a lot with what we talked about last week. But before we get started, I just wanted to remind you to go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel so that you get other videos that aren't live. Also, take a second and head over to my website, upstatesuzukiacademy.com, and subscribe to my newsletter. I send out weekly newsletters on Saturdays with practice tips and lots of ideas for how to make sure your practice is productive and fun, because practice is work. It's hard work, and it's a lot easier when we can make it fun. So it's not always about gamifying. Sometimes it's about just keeping focused on what your goals are, but that's not what we're talking about today in our lives. So head on over to the website and subscribe to the email newsletter. We have a lot of exciting changes happening on the website over the next week or so. Starting October 1st, my shop will be live online with some, goodies to go along with these videos. You'll also be able to subscribe to a monthly membership, which will give you unlimited access to these videos because these will only be up on YouTube for a month, and handouts to go along with each video. So I also have some teaching guides and practice guides to help make your viola learning journey successful. And so those will be posted in the shop as I finish making them. I did have a little snafu with my hard drive. And so a lot of these things I have to create from scratch because I've been writing them over the years as I've been teaching and studying the viola. So there we have it. Let's go ahead and get started on today's topic, which is finger patterns. So last week I talked about shifting. And if you remember, shifting is when we move our fingers up and down the fingerboard to access higher notes or to make it more convenient to play certain note patterns. So you might notice today I have tapes, and that's going to help with some visual aids for what we're talking about today. When you first learned how to play the viola or the violin, this is relevant for violin, and it's also helpful to keep in mind for guitar and other string instruments as well. Although the fretted instruments, you have the frets as visual aids, and on the unfretted instruments, we don't have the visual aid once you lose your tapes. So the first finger pattern that you learn, you have your second and third finger next to each other. All right. So if you recall from previous conversations or from your music theory classes, those are half steps when our fingers are right next to each other. And when there's space between the fingers, like I have here between my first and second finger, we call that a whole step. 2 half steps is a whole step. All right. So our first finger pattern that we learn is officially called the 2-3 finger pattern. Okay. I also call it the home finger pattern because it's where your hand should default to. Usually students spend most of their first year only playing in this finger pattern on all the strings. When you very first start out, if we have any complete beginners here, you're probably not even using your pinky yet. All right. So your finger pattern is your open string, first finger, second finger, third finger. All right. So what that sounds like then is going to be open string, first finger, second finger, half step here. And then if you're using your pinky, and of course that matches your A string. Okay. Now I skipped over some of the basics here, some of the whys and what fors. So finger patterns are how we place our fingers on the string. All right. So like I said, we talked about shifting last week, and that's where your hand is positioned. All right. Now, finger patterns are how we lay our fingers in that position. So right now, my hand is in first position with the 2-3 finger pattern. All right. Now, why is it important to learn these things? There are a couple of reasons. first of all, is it helps with better sight reading, because if you can associate your finger patterns with different key signatures, when you're sight reading, your fingers know where to go to play the certain notes. All right. Another reason, or another way that it helps with sight reading, is when you have accidentals in your music. That's when a note is marked sharp or flat or even natural, where that's different than the key signature. Again, your brain can just automatically send your finger to the right place for that note. So the other reason, one of the main reasons that we want to practice finger patterns, is it helps reinforce your intonation and it makes your notes reliable. All right. When you play the piano, your note is going to be in tune as long as you hit the right key and your piano is in tune. Okay. On an unfretted string instrument like this, we have to place our fingers in the correct spot for the note to be in tune. All right. So if we are not practicing finger patterns and not paying attention to where our fingers land, we're not going to be playing the note that we mean to play. For example, if I'm supposed to play E on the D string, I can't just put my first finger down any old place and have that be an E. All right. If I had a tuner, I would actually say that my finger is very sharp. You can see it's not on the tape. Now, if my finger's in the correct place, then I'm playing a very nice E there. One of the biggest places that we can tell whether our fingers are in tune or not is our third finger on the G, D, and A string, because they're the octave from the lower open string, right? So if my third finger on the D string is in tune, you can hear all of that ringing and those overtones from the G string. Now, if it's not in tune, right, you could hear how it was kind of sliding around a little bit, but it was kind of dead sounding. All right. I don't want to say flat. I mean, if I do say flat, it's like flat like that, as opposed to too low. It was too low for part of that time, but it was also too high. And that left kind of a dense sound in the instrument, as opposed to that high ringing sound that we had when it was in tune. Right? So there's the difference. The other finger that's most notable is the fourth finger, when it's playing the same note as the open string above. So there's my fourth finger A, it's still ringing. Fourth finger D. Right? It makes the D string very ringy and echoey. Where my fourth finger is not in tune, it might register as a D on the tuner. Hopefully it will also tell you it's flat, but your viola is telling you that it's flat too. All right. So with finger pattern practice, my finger intonation can get more reliable because my muscles know where to go and my fingers know where to go. All right. So let's get back to talking about our home finger pattern, or the first finger pattern, the 2-3. And again, that 2-3 is referring to where the half steps are. So we have the half step between the second and third finger. All right. So if I'm going to practice that as a finger pattern, let's say I'm a beginner and I have not learned to use my pinky yet. So an exercise I might do on all of my strings is... And once you're comfortable with that, you can go a little faster. Okay. It's also good to practice in thirds because that helps strengthen your independent fingers. So without the pinky, I would do a thirds exercise like this. I might do open string, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, A. Oh, open string, right? Because I could do that on any string. By the way, I see we have several viewers here today. Go ahead and say hi in the chat if you want to. I'd love to see who's here. All right. So if we're practicing that on the D string, then of course we would have D, E, F sharp, G, and then back down. And in thirds. Okay, and you can practice that slowly first until it's comfortable. Slowly until it's comfortable, and then you can go a little bit faster. So after some time in your first year, you'll learn to use your pinky as well. So that actually adds a lot of options for our exercises. So sticking with the D string here, if I add my pinky, and then the third exercise, we would do open, 2, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 1. If you wander through practice rooms at any college, you might hear a lot of people warming up with an exercise that sounds like that. All right, so. And then, of course, after some practice, you can use it to practice different bowing techniques by changing your speed or adding slurs. So if I wanted to go faster, I might play it like that. Okay. And then, of course, play it on the G string and on the C string. Now, another trick you can do with these finger pattern exercises, excuse me, I have a itchy spot on my nose. Another thing you can do with these exercises is practice your music alphabet. Really give some thought to the notes that you're playing, and it will help your brain connect those letter names so that when you're reading music, that also can make you more fluent with the note reading. All right. And we'll have some viola talks later on where we talk about clefs and learning to read in different clefs for our instrument. There are more resources available now than there used to be for alto clef readers, but they're still not as accessible as treble and bass clef readers. So we have to get creative in how we practice reading our notes. All right, so I covered all the exercises for the first finger pattern. Our second finger pattern, now this is going to be the second one that you learn in your first year in orchestra, and that's going to be our low second finger. Okay, so we call this the 1-2. I'm sure you can guess why, because the half step is between the first and second fingers. All right. Now, if anybody on here has been playing for a long time, you're probably doing these finger patterns without even thinking about it, but it helps to give it some thought and think about the theory of why you're doing what you're doing and why you're playing the way you're playing. So we would use the 1-2 finger pattern if we have, for example, in the key of C, we have C natural on the A string, F natural on the D string. But if we're over on the G string, the key of C does not have any sharps or flats. So we would go back to our 2-3 finger pattern. All right. And we'll get into this in more detail when we talk about our scales in a few weeks. But our finger pattern is not necessarily going to stay the same for each string, which is another reason why it's a good idea to practice all of them as much as possible. So again, in the key of C, when we go to the C string, we'll also be in our 2-3 finger pattern. All right. But we're in our 1-2 finger pattern. So this is the spacing. And sorry, it's kind of awkward to do it at this angle. There we go. So our second finger's in this space between the first and second finger tape. First finger's there on the tape. Third finger is on the tape. And fourth finger is on the tape. All right. So I'm going to put it in playing position and show you because that's more comfortable for me. All right. You can see my second finger here is in the space. So that's going to sound like this. If I do the same exercises, but with my fingers in the new finger pattern. Some people might call that our minor finger pattern because the third is low. So the third note of that little half scale is a low note, all right, instead of on the tape. So a major finger pattern and the minor finger pattern. All right, and we can do thirds the same way, and that practices that stretch between the second and third finger. All right, good. So some things to watch out with that finger pattern is to make sure that pulling that second finger back does not pull the third and fourth finger. right? It's easy to get used to those second and third fingers touching. And when you move that second finger, the third finger wants to follow. Wait, I missed my friend, right? But we don't want to do that. The other thing that I see a lot in lessons is when the second finger gets pulled back to the lower position, the first finger runs away, goes, no, there's supposed to be space, right? But we don't want to do that either. So each finger has to be comfortable staying in its position no matter what finger pattern we're using. So again, one more reason why it's a good idea to practice these separately. All right, good. Let's see, I covered everything from that one. So let's move on to the next. So, I forgot to mention at the very beginning, there are 6 finger patterns for violin and viola players. And every curriculum, every method agrees on the first 3, that they're the most popular. So those are the 3 we're covering today. 4, 5, and 6 are usually introduced in different orders depending on the curriculum that you're following. But the fact that they're there is agreed on by every book that I have, like 7 different publications of first year material. And all of them agree that 4, 5, and 6 are 4, 5, and 6, just not which order. So we'll cover those next week because they're a little bit more obscure and a little more difficult to practice. But these first 3 are definitely, if you are solid on these 3, you should be able to play just about anything because you know enough about half steps and whole steps that you can figure out the other finger patterns as you go. So anyway, getting back to it, let's go to our 3rd finger pattern. So this one is called the 3-4 finger pattern. All right. So the 3-4 finger pattern, we have our first finger on the tape, second finger on the tape. Third finger is what we call a high third finger. So it's going to be a half step above the tape. And then the 4th finger on the tape. All right. So first finger on the tape, second finger on the tape, third between 3 and 4, and the 4th finger on. All right. So that's going to give us G sharp on the D string. All right. I'm going to scoot over a little bit. There we go. So it's going to sound like this. You can hear that half step there between the 3rd and 4th finger. So doing the same finger exercises as before. And if we do thirds. So nobody has any questions so far. I don't see any questions in the chat. So I'm just going to keep plowing ahead. So we do have, I call it a different finger pattern, but it's not really. It's our 3-4 finger pattern, but in the gutter is what I call it. All right. And let me show you what I mean by that. So we have our 3-4 finger pattern with a 3rd finger here between the 3rd and 4th finger tape. But some key signatures have enough flat notes that our fingers all go down a half step. All right. So our first finger is in the space between the tape and the nut. All right. So that's E flat on the D string. Our second finger then also follows along, still a whole step above, but in between the tapes. So in the gutter. Our third finger then, instead of being here between the 3rd and 4th finger tapes, is now on the 3rd finger tape. And our 4th finger has followed along as well and is in the space. So everybody's in the gutter except the 3rd finger that's on the tape. All right. So that's going to have a very different sound. Even though your finger pattern is the same, the sound of it is different. And sometimes that tricks our brains. All right. So let me play that one for you. So D, E flat, F natural, G, A flat. All right, so here it is a little bit faster. And now I'm going to play it not in the gutter. All right, so there you go. That has a very different sound. Good, we have a comment here. So Abby said, I really struggle when playing like just E flat, but all other notes are normal. Yes, yes. Abby, that is an excellent point. And that's actually one of the more advanced finger patterns. Although Actually, no, that's our third finger pattern here that we're talking about, the 3.5 in the gutter. When you play E flat, if you have an E flat in the key signature, it's going to be an F natural. So you'll have a low second finger there, and then G, and then you might have A flat. If you don't have an A flat, you can just lift the first finger to reach that fourth finger. So if you have a key signature that just is B flat and E flat, but you have A natural, you can pivot the around the second and third fingers so that you can reach comfortably without straining. But definitely practice those finger patterns as a warm-up. Now, if you are putting your fourth finger on the tape, that is actually our fourth finger pattern that we're going to get to next week. But you can use the same exercises that I'm going over here to practice that stretched finger pattern. But the key is going to be to relaxing in the thumb area over here. And like I said, if you have to reach, you can pivot based on the position of the second and third fingers. Lift that first finger so you can reach the 4. And when you're going back for the first, of course, your fourth would be up. I hope you can see that okay. All right. But Abby, thank you. We can bring that up in your lesson later on this week if you want some more ideas about that. But thank you for asking. All right, so let's go over all the finger patterns that I talked about so far. So I actually covered 4, even though it's the third one twice, right? So first finger pattern is on our fingertips here. Yes, Abby. That is definitely a bad habit that took me a long time to get used to it as well. And again, we can talk about some ways you can practice relaxing that thumb in your lesson this week. All right, so the second finger pattern then that was the 2-3. Our second finger pattern is the 1-2 with that second finger in the space here. And so that was kind of a sad sounding one. All right. And our third finger pattern then was the 3-4 finger pattern. So with our fingers on the tape, just our regular old 3-4, we have the third finger up here next to the fourth finger. First and second finger are on their tapes. So it sounds like this. Third finger pattern, the 3-4 finger pattern in the gutter is going to be with our first finger down for E flat, second finger in the space, third finger on the tape, and fourth finger in the space. And it'll sound like this. So those are the top 3 most popular finger patterns you're going to be using, playing the viola or the violin. And then you can use those finger patterns in any position, okay? So the only difference would be not using the open string for the base of that, all right? So, and when we finish covering all the finger patterns and start talking about the positions themselves, I will connect those dots for you and explain a little bit better. But give that some thought and think about that while you're practicing. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and head over to the website and subscribe to my mailing list for your practice tips weekly email. Practice these finger patterns, practice saying the note names, practice going up and down the scale, practice the thirds like I was demonstrating. And when you learn shifting, and we talk about the shifted positions later on, you'll get some additional exercises that you can use to practice those finger patterns in the shifted position, because it's going to sound different. And if you don't plan ahead and get your ear used to it ahead of time, if you apply it while you're playing repertoire or sight reading, that can throw off your brain, because your ear goes, wait, what did I just hear? And it can make you stutter in your playing. All right. So, one more thing that you can do too to help with your note reading is practice writing out the exercises that you're doing. Okay. You can copy them from printed music if you want to, but writing them out, transcribing what you hear, is a completely different skill. In fact, it's something I'm still learning how to do. All right. I can read just about anything and I can play it pretty well, but to write down something I'm hearing is definitely something that needs extra work. In my case, I can hear rhythms pretty well. The pitches I struggle with. So, writing these exercises are great practice for that side of the music cube. We can't even call it a coin because there are so many sides to it. But yeah, so give that some thought. Feel free to put a comment on any of my videos for additional questions or help, or shoot me an email. You can contact me through YouTube here, or you can contact me on my website. My email is mandy.alman@upstatesuzukiacademy.com. The website is upstatesuzukiacademy.com. Remember, October 1st, the shop is opening, and I'm so excited about the things that'll be available. No courses just yet. I'm expecting those to be ready January 1st, but everything else I will be starting to upload next week. So very excited. And yeah, so I will see you guys next week to talk about the rest of the finger patterns and hear some exciting sounds, because they give us some really crazy exotic sounds with the other finger patterns. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. Have a great evening.